Hello and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm pumped as always to be here with you. Sadly, my musical brother-in-arms, Paul Bindig, can't join us this episode. He's off saving the musical world. Hope you're doing well, Paul. But I am extremely pleased to be introducing this episode's guests. Mr. Steve Maggiora plays keyboards with some band you might have heard of called Toto. And is just about 6 weeks post a major tour. So we talked to Steve about his work with Toto. So Toto fans, lots of Toto talk, but I'm very pleased to report there's also lots of other talk in here. Steve has had the most amazing, diverse career, and what's very fascinating about Steve's development as a musician is his apprenticeship, if you like to call it, into music is just amazing to hear about, and it totally sort of underpins why he's been so successful to date. So, yeah, I think you'll enjoy this interview very much. Steve has a great sense of humour and has a lot to impart to us all, so I hope you enjoy the interview. Steve, absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm drinking in your background. I just love your background. You've got everything you need there in life behind you, so I love it. I thought we'd start off. You've just gotten back about, was it 6 weeks ago from some fairly intensive touring with Toto?
Yeah. We wrapped the tour April 26th.
Yeah,
in,
okay. So
in Palm Springs, California. Yeah.
And how was that? Yeah, sort of you recovered now. What are those first couple of weeks like after a tour? Like, is it a lot of sleeping and psychological recovery, or how does it go for you after a tour?
Sometimes these couple tours that I've done with Toto have been really great, and so having a day off after the tour and you get back home and you unpack and get your laundry done from the last couple of weeks of, being on the road and stretching things so you don't have to do laundry on the road. But then, after maybe 2 or 3 days, you're just like, man, I wish I was back on tour.
Yeah,
and you start getting that, the post-tour depression, I like to call it, where you're not used to being in one place for more than, maximum 2 or 3 days at a time.
And how do you actually cope or work your way through that? Because that's a common thing for a lot of touring musicians.
Yeah, for me, it's about throwing myself into the next project. Luckily, we've got a Japan tour coming up in July. So after this tour, I went home for a week, and I was, I'm still kind of in the middle. You can see a bunch of keyboards and stuff behind me, but I'm in the middle of getting my home studio set up. I recently moved back up to the San Francisco Bay Area and just slowly putting things together in the midst of other projects. And so that's very exciting. And I was back for a week, and then I went to go visit my girlfriend in France for 2 weeks and had some video content that I had to shoot out there during my time. So it's always nice to have another project on the horizon and something to look forward to that keeps the creative juices flowing.
Excellent. And we're going to talk about some of your current projects. So just sticking on the Toto stuff for a minute. So as you said, you've toured intensively, probably starting from the start. How did that gig initially come about for you?
Initially, so I've been friends with Steve Lukather's son, Trev, for a little over a decade now. And we, I guess when Steve P was leaving the project and they were looking for somebody to fill the space and, some big shoes to fill there for sure. Trev threw my name in the hat to Luke and they had me do a couple video auditions, sent them over to him, and then got together with Luke and Joe, and they ran me through some vocal exercises and, went over to the house and sat down, played the piano, did some stuff, just the three of us, and as kind of an in-person audition, and that went well, and here I am.
That's excellent. So you didn't have to sort of sit in front of a piano with David Paish standing over your shoulder, making sure you've got the chops. I mean, it's obvious you have the chops, but it was more about that fit with the band and your vocal ability and so on.
Yeah, vocal ability, and also just, being able to hang. People don't realize sometimes that, being on tour as much as, this band does and most bands do, it's not, you're only really on stage doing music for about 10% of the time, if that. The rest of the time is, hours and hours on a bus together, and late nights and early mornings, and, interrupted sleep, and, and traveling. And so if the hang is difficult, it makes the tours a lot more cumbersome. So it was nice to know that the guys thought that I was worth the hang.
That's right. That's important.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I can imagine. I'm guessing you wouldn't have had an opportunity to sort of pick up the sound design or other approach from Steve Porcaro. So what was the approach? Was there a good keyboard tech within Toto that got your head across what they were previously using, or did you have to essentially set up from the ground up?
Yeah, we were initially when I first spoke to the keyboard tech, we were talking about how we wanted to handle all of these sounds and what we wanted to do live with it. And I know that they had used like a main stage rig in the past, and as soon as I got the gig, I was looking up every interview that I could find, with Steve P talking about the setup and everything, and just trying to wrap my head around how am I going to accomplish this and get things close. And we ended up landing on just doing everything in the box, in the boards themselves. So the keyboard sounds aren't being triggered off a main stage. I'm running a Roland VR730. I'm running a Roland Jupiter 80, an FA06, and then a Nord Electro 4 for a lot of the organ sounds. And it was all just programming in those boards themselves. I got from the band, I got the list of songs that we were going to do, and then I just went through, I did a deep dive on YouTube and on the albums and everything, and just listening to what was going on the recordings, and like, is this probably something that and mind you, like, I didn't really know what was Page's stuff and what was Porcaro's stuff. So it's going through and kind of learning both and figuring out the relationship between, all 6 keyboards at some points, and how to really tackle that, and just made some notes and came in, as prepared as I could be. I was looking up a ton of live versions of tunes from tours over the last 20 years, and just seeing, how the parts evolve, from the records, and what was being performed live, and what was, trying to catch those glimpses of, hand positions and everything from the live concert DVDs and stuff that have been released in the past. And then it was just about, menu diving my way through these Roland keyboards and trying to get things to sound as close as possible, and figure out a workflow for where I was going to put each sounds. How many times am I splitting the keyboard? If I'm layering, am I, making one key 2 or 3 separate notes, so that I save space on the board itself. And that was all, like pre-production stuff before we got into rehearsals. And then in rehearsals, the keyboard tech, Jordan would, help me out with some sounds, as he's been with the project for a while. And David Page came in and was, super helpful and super kind and patient with me, because a lot of these boards were new for me. And he was like, yeah, like, if we can get this and if we can get that, and, quarter triplet delay on this thing, and, let's detune this thing a little bit. And he'd go through with a fine tooth comb and kind of, help me get the sounds from, maybe 60% to 98%, and what he wanted and what Luke wanted and everything. So.
And so that's quite a bit of lead time. I assume you had a decent amount, because we quite often have guests that say, oh, look, I got the new gig and I had 2 weeks to learn the songs. That wouldn't have been feasible with Toto.
Yeah, to learn the songs would have been feasible, but the programming, I mean, it's just masterful what Steve Porcaro, and David Page did with these tunes, man. Like, and it's a lot of stuff that you hear the sound and you think it's one thing, and then you realize, wait, like it's actually, this stack of a whole bunch of stuff, and it's really cool, just diving through all of that. I got hired onto the group in December 2019, and I was going to have a lot less lead time, but then the pandemic happened, and all of a sudden I found myself with a little more free time to really dive in and get these things as close as I can. So.
And so you just mentioned, David Page and Luke sort of being there during rehearsals. So how, aside from them helping you set up the sounds, obviously there are some iconic sounds in certain songs. Do you have a little bit of leeway for your own interpretation, or because they're, a lot of the songs are so iconic that it is pretty much this is what you need to stick to?
There's a lot that is, has to be verbatim what it was. The sounds, for certain things are just so iconic you can't really mess with it. But as it happens with every band, I feel, and when you start to produce the live version of it, things are going to change. And in my own research of the group, it was really cool to see that, a lot of Steve P's parts, and not just the sounds, but like the actual parts and how he's crafting the songs for live would change from the record. So it might be, strings on this thing, but then in this version he's doing like an organ thing or a synth pad, or had something else going on. So there is a little bit of freedom in that to be able to kind of plug in my own, ideas and stuff, but obviously with the guidance and the permission from the OGs in the project. So
absolutely, yeah. And the other issue is, you're part of a band that obviously you're not the only keyboard player. There's yourself and Xavier, and to some extent David Page still jumps in for songs. So on some nights there's three of you there. What was the collaboration around how you made that work, particularly between you and Xavier as the two people are there, every night?
Dom's got all of the piano page stuff. That's his main. Like if you broke it down to like what does he play, what do I play? He's focused on the piano stuff, and I'm focused on the synth stuff. But there is times where we overlap. He's got a second and Nord lead, on his stack, so he'll jump up. We do Africa together. We're actually playing both parts for Africa together for the intros and everything. So we're both doing the bump, 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 hit the sustain pedal so that rings out, and then we, switch up to the and that's been really fun to work in that, sonic choreography with him. There's also like a moment in the show where in Home of the Brave, he's doing this piano thing and then hops to a synth lead thing, and him and Luke will, have some stage time up there together. And so in that moment, I've got my Nord switch to the piano sound. And so as he switches from piano to synth, I'm sustaining my, synth patch strings up top on my FA06, and then I take over for the piano stuff with him, and I'm having to do double sustain pedal on the feet, which is always fun if I don't fall over.
Good point.
Yeah.
And you've alluded to a really important point there, that some of the Toto music is quite intensive from a keyboard viewpoint. How do you have any support mechanisms as far as, do you literally have that memorized, or like a lot of musicians, do you at least have a prompt sheet or some prompts in case you have a brain blank?
I do during the rehearsal process. So I'm meticulous when it comes to learning stuff, and it's especially with this gig, you have to do right by the people that came before you. It just wouldn't be a good situation if you thought that you could just make it up as you went along. So I'm constantly aware of doing right by what Steve Porcaro built and what David Page built, and then there are moments in the show where I can kind of do my own thing and just, jam and, kind of be free to, evolve and do my own thing there. But for the most part, the parts are the parts, and you have to kill it. There's no other option. So my process leading into rehearsals is I write everything out. I transcribe everything by hand, which takes a lot longer than just doing it by rote. But for me, that becomes my cheat sheet if I'm ever confused about like, oh, what was on the record, and then again, over the course of 46, 47 years, some of those things have changed in the live show. So I'll make notes of that in the rehearsal process, and I've got my iPad out with those and, with my keyboard movements and stuff. And if things get too difficult, or if I'm getting too cross-handed or a lot of the times, because I'm doing all of this research on my own before the rehearsals, I'll get to the rehearsal process and I don't need to be doing half the stuff that I wrote down, because Dom's covering it on piano, or it just doesn't need to be there and it's muddying up the sound. That was a big thing in the 2022 tour rehearsals, where Paige came in and was just like, hey man, like, I really appreciate you trying to do all of it, but you're making way too much work for yourself. Like, just ditch your left hand. We have a bass player. Like, you don't need to be covering that. It doesn't need to be there. These big things. Like, there's certain moments where it's called for, but for the most part, like, just let it open up and, go one-handed for this, or find something else to do on a different board, and that was really nice, to just be like, oh yeah, like I might be trying to do too much, and realizing that it is still a band and it needs to have, sonically, everybody needs to have their part of the spectrum that they fill.
I had to smile then, Steve, when you're talking about David saying, leave the left hand out, because many years ago learning Hold the Line for a cover band, and I remember spending hours trying to catch whether David actually used a left hand in that initial piano riff or not, and decided that he didn't, just to make it easier for me to learn the song.
Yeah. And there's, I don't need to do anything with my left hand on there, because it's, Dom's got it covered on piano. So, and I'm just playing B3 on that and having a blast. It's there was some other synth stuff that we had in there, and then it just sounded bigger in the arenas with just the guitar, and piano, and just having that B3 wailing up on top and tucked into the mix right.
Yeah, no, great stuff. And obviously there's quite an alumni club of keyboard players in Toto. I know, I'm not sure whether it was on the last tour, but you've sort of run across Greg Phillinganes playing the odd gig. I think it was when Dom had to take some leave for a little while or something. Yeah,
last summer in Europe. Greg came in and was with us for, I believe it was our Norway dates on that tour, and that was just killer, man. Like, dude is just such a badass, and this one of the sweetest guys I've worked with, and it was really cool getting to back him up and get a little hang time with him, and hear some stories from all these iconic groups and sessions and projects that he's worked on, and also just shooting the shit on life stuff and everything too. He's just a really, really great guy and class act, and what a beast of a player.
He sure is. Yeah, no, absolutely. And so on this last tour, I know it was part of the Journey tour. So in a lot of gigs, you were playing a sort of a shorter 10 song set with a fairly set structure each night. What did you do to keep that fresh, or what did the band do to keep it fresh? Obviously, it's challenging if you're playing 10 songs and essentially the same order every night. So you've got to keep yourself amused and motivated. What were some of the strategies you used there?
I mean, there wasn't really much to, have to keep me interested up there. We're doing the shorter sets, in arenas is just, it's insane. You step out on the stage, and I think that, this goes for me as well as I'm pretty confident that I can speak for everybody else in the band. Like, that never gets old. It's thrilling to walk out there and just see so many people that, love the music and love live music. And, I'm sure a lot of them, are, giving up a lot to be able to be there and to witness it live. And it's just, all you got to do is look up. If you ever feel out, and everybody's got tough days out on the road, but you step out there, man, and it's just, all that just melts away, and you can keep that stuff in the green room. When you step out on that stage, you just gotta get up there and do your job and do it well, and and just be one with the audience. I think something that was really cool about this tour that we just did with Journey was that we had the opportunity in between the Journey dates to do the full 2-hour show, and do headlining nights at, theaters and casinos across the U.S. and Canada. And it kept it fresh because we were able to stretch out, and then come back in and just, hit that power hour. It's like a 2x4 of music to the front of the face. It's fantastic, man. Like, just so fun to play the hits, and just do mainly hits for these big arena shows, and then to be able to stretch out and have, extended versions of certain songs, and, play some deep cuts and everything, and really, craft a 2-hour show that takes you on a journey. And Luke and Joe and Paige really did a marvelous job with both sets, I feel, picking the songs and the order and everything. And it was just so much fun and nice to be able to do different stuff each week,
Absolutely. And I assume the reaction from fans, Toto fans can be a discerning bunch. They're obviously, incredibly loyal, have loved the band for a lot of years. How's the reaction to you and Dom as the relative newcomers to the band? It's been a supportive reaction?
It's been absolutely 100% supportive. And the Toto fans, I have never experienced fans like that band has. They're, just as you said, they're loyal. They also really care about what everybody's doing individually. I had another project that I was equally involved with up until last summer, and they, had a lot of Toto fans be really supportive of that, and really supportive of what I'm doing with my Patreon page, and my own solo shows and solo music and other projects that I'm working on. And it's been really cool to see just the love of music that these people have, and, their dedication to not only the band, but also the musicians. Like, I feel like that doesn't always come across in a fan base. And it's really refreshing to get to, meet these people. And with some of them, like, they'll come, like, I played at the Mint in Los Angeles last month, and it was, a 30-minute set for a music showcase, and had a bunch of Toto fans come out to that, and they were like, "Hey, this was really cool to see you in a more intimate setting and doing different music and stuff." I'm like, "This is wow! Like, you drove in from, you drove an hour to be here, 2 hours to be here. Like, that's fantastic. Like, what? Thank you. It's really
amazing.
Cool."
Last two Toto questions, Steve. So over the past three plus years of playing Toto, what has it taught you that you maybe hadn't learnt to date as a keyboard player, musician, person even? Anything that you've really picked up?
I think the main thing is just to treat everybody with the respect that you would want to be treated with, like this band, it really blew my mind from the first time that we got together. Because it was there's just so much respect there for who people are and what they do. And that was, it was wild for me coming in as somebody that hadn't played with the Big Name Project before, to come in and be at have a seat at the table of this, massive band, and also to be shown, way more respect than I would have gotten in, other projects and stuff. And just like everybody's just a person doing what they love to do. And, and they're good at what they do if they're have a seat at the table, so it was really cool to just be like, hey, I don't know you, but I respect you, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you. And the more that I tour with the guys and travel with them, it's just exhibited to me every day how much that matters, and it costs nothing,
Yeah. Great perspective. That's a great perspective, Steve, and much appreciated. And the last question is a little bit corny, but I'll ask it anyway. Across Toto's whole discography, even if it's a song that wouldn't normally be played live, what would your favourite song from a keyboard viewpoint you would love to play, whether you do play it or whether it's something that probably would never end up in a live set?
We haven't done Jake to the Bone yet with this group, this iteration of it. I think that would be a really fun one to do. I recently went through and listened just all the way through. I had a bunch of driving back and forth from Northern California to Southern California and listened through all of the Toto records, just top to bottom, the whole discography. And it's a lot of music, man, and a lot of really cool stuff. But I'm loving the stuff that we're doing. I don't know if there's like one in particular that I would want to do, but Jake to the Bone I think would be really fun to bring it out, even if it's like in part of like a medley or something. And we've never played Child's Anthem either with this iteration, and I think that'd be fun too. Just crank it up and let's go.
That's right. No, great picks. Excellent. And so, let's move on. You mentioned your previous project that you were in, unless I've got my maths wrong, around 10 years with Robert John and the Wreck. So tell us about how that came about. And I'm guessing that was your first long-term gig as far as a band goes.
So I met, that was really the first band that I've started a lot of projects over the years with people. And that was the first one that really like took off and flourished, I was in a performing arts organization called the Young Americans I actually dropped out of college to work for them, producing music for the group and doing videography for them. And then and produced a bunch of touring shows with them. They had these really wonderful music outreach tours that they would do internationally and nationally. And I did all the music for them. So that was kind of my first foray into producing and learning, even hearing some of these tunes. Like I never really got into the Beatles until I was like 21 years old, and we had a Beatles medley for this dinner theater in Michigan. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like these are rad. And, let me pick them apart and recreate them from scratch by ear, for people to perform to. Had some friends in that group that were, they had started a band, and I would mix sound for them from time to time, and Robert John would be opening up for them here and there. Got to meet him through that, and then he asked me to play with him for some like duo shows, and then some full band shows. And then a couple months later, he approached me and the other guys that were playing for his solo project, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to do the band thing, and do you want to start a band and, write and record and go on tour?" And I'm like, hell yeah, dude, like, let's do it. So we started and didn't really know what we were doing, and, threw shit on a wall and saw what sticks. And and it was a really cool, decade of watching that project, blossom and build. And, within 5 years, we were touring Europe for the first time, and we, were lucky to work with, and they still work with, this amazing man, Manny Montana with Teenage Head Music out there, that's been bringing over American rock bands to Europe since 1998. And being blessed to have his network of venues and fans that trust his brand, so that we could come into, some random town in Switzerland, 10,000 miles away from home, and people are singing our tunes and asking us for requests off the back catalog, and, all this stuff. It was really amazing to watch that build and everything. And, doing the Bonamassa Blues cruises, I did 2 of them with them, and then it was eventually, without saying much about it, time to move on. So,
absolutely, and I mean, you mentioned Toto fans there were quite supportive and so on, and it sounded like a natural juncture to move on to something else. I've got to ask about the cruises. It's one I've meant to ask a couple of guests. What is it like playing those rock cruises? Because I can see there's some huge upsides, but I'm guessing there are some downsides too. What do you like or not like so much about playing rock cruises?
I mean, really, the I've never done any rock cruises, so I'm not sure about that. Yeah. But the blues cruises, and specifically the Joe Bonamassa blues cruises, it's just awesome. Like it's a lot of people. It was really cool to see a lot of the same fans coming back, on the second one that we were on. And a lot of them have been on, many, if not all, of the Bonamassa Blues cruises that have been. And again, super loyal fans that would, come and see us if we were playing, in the U.S. or in Europe. And they would show up to our gigs, and we didn't know where we were, but they were like, yeah, like caught a train for 4 hours to come see you guys, and this is the closest you're going to get to where I live. And it's like, that's just amazing. It's a really cool party, and it's if you're a drinker, you got to pace yourself, and you got to really learn how to pace yourself. But I think one of the cool things about the cruises is that you're all stuck on the same boat together. You can't just get off. You can go back to your cabin, but let's face it, like, unless you're, got buku bucks and you've got the one with the, big ensuite and everything, like, which there's not that many of those on the ship anyway. The room's really not the place to be, and there's music going on from like 10 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock in the morning. So, and with, the cultivation of what bands they have coming on the ship and everything, it's just like you want to go see everything, and there's just not enough time in the day because some of the shows overlap. So you're like, hey, I'm going to go see, go catch like half hour of Joanne Shaw Taylor's set, and then I got to bust over here to go see King King, and then I got to bust over here to go see this Q&A with whomever, and it's really cool just to be on the boat with all these other artists, and then you all end up in the casino together, hanging out at the bar and talking music, and some people are producers and some people are engineers or aspiring players or hang drywall for a living, and it's just everybody's excited about the same things, and it's this really cool just congregation of music lovers that give a lot of shits about it, and really care, and it's fun. I've enjoyed it. The getting enough sleep, and making sure that you're good vocally for your sets on the boat, is probably the hardest part about them. But that just comes with self-discipline and self-control.
Yeah, no, great perspective.
Not staying up and shouting all night, or singing drunken karaoke until 3 a.m. and having a morning set.
That's right. Now, Steve, you mentioned your voice there, and I'm really keen to talk about your brilliant voice as well. So let's maybe take a huge step backwards. So what first got you into music? And so I want to cover sort of that period between where you discovered a passion for music and say, starting out with Robert John, all the production stuff and your development as a musician. What sort of kicked you off?
My dad is a phenomenal musician. He's an accordion player and has a brilliant band here in the Bay Area called the Internationals that does dance music from everywhere. A lot of polkas, waltzes, German music, Swiss music, Italian music and stuff. And I grew up going, with him to go, to his gigs and everything. And he had a really great community and still has a really great community of fans and followers and stuff up here that, and they're still rocking, the quartet's still going, 47, 48 years later, and, so I saw the like the thing that really made it for me is the camaraderie between the band members and stuff. Like you're not just playing together, you are family. So it's like the bass player for my dad's band is my godfather, and they've been together for a long time and playing music for a long time. And I grew up going and, singing along to the songs, and every once and again, my dad would pull me up to do like the bare necessities or something with the band and hop on the mic. And I loved it. I fell in love with the way that you feel when you're on stage and in the spotlight and supported by other really great musicians. I started taking piano lessons seriously around 8 years old. And my piano teacher, Carol DeMonte, wonderful, wonderful woman, got me started doing composition very early. And this is something that I brought in when I taught lessons for a little while in my 20s. And it was a really cool thing that she did where I didn't know anything about music theory. She would have me write like a weekly or monthly composition when I was starting out at like 8 years old. And I could notate it however I wanted to, however it made sense to me to be able to recreate it and know that like this is what was in my head and I put it on paper and I can recreate that. And as I kept doing that, and as she started teaching me music theory, I started being able to conform to like the Western version of music theory and being able to write music and read music and everything. And then from an early age, like, 10, 11 years old, I really fell in love with writing and creating, just to have something that doesn't exist anywhere and filter it through your emotions and the prism of yourself and your experiences, which, even at 10 years old, like there's a lot of stuff going on there with puberty and, family dynamics as they change and everything. And playing music and writing music became my, form. It was my catharsis, that was the way that I got my emotions out when I couldn't always, talk about it or, and moving into, junior high and high school, I started getting more into it. My parents got me a little like Casio keyboard, that had the little built-in sequencer on it. So I started building out, these songs in there, and, the D batteries would die and you'd lose everything, and then got into high school and was, playing in the worship band at the church. And that was cool because I was 13 when that started, and when the band started up, and everybody else was these musicians that I looked up to, and they gave me a shot, had me play second keys. So I was having to figure out, just off of the chord and lyric sheets, what else could go there, and it kind of sparked my composer and producer brain a little bit from a young age to be like, oh, cool. Like I could do this and I could do that. And, try not to overplay and try to support and everything. And then singing and playing at the same time came into effect. And then, around 14, 15 years old, I started doing, tracks for another church's kids programs, and for these children's musicals that this woman at the church was writing and putting together. And at the time I had a Korg Triton Pro X that was pretty much on loan from the church. It's what I would use for the worship stuff, but they'd let me take it home during the week. And, just building stuff out in the built-in sequencer in there. I knew nothing of quantization or, how anything worked really, but just getting my hands on it and figuring that out, as limited as it was really cool, and also inspired me to think of it more as like I could really do this for a living, And then my junior year of high school, I wrote a musical with a friend of mine from the school, and we produced it as a one-act play. After my junior year, summer between junior year and senior year, I decided that was going to be my senior project, was to turn that into a feature film. And so that was a massive undertaking, and that was my first time getting into a recording studio. My parents, God bless them, helped me out, to cover the cost of the studio and everything, and the camera gear and all that, and they've been hugely supportive and always have been with my artistry, which I feel very lucky for. And when I went into the studio working with Bill Hare, who's I think one or two or three Grammys, but brilliant engineer here in the Bay Area. And so here I am, 16, about to turn 17 years old. I've got this musical. I've done it in the built-in sequencer in my keyboard. And Bill is the first person to kind of lay into me about not having things professionally done. And he did it with such a grace and just the way that he brought it up. He was like, look, man, you gotta, why isn't this quantized? I'm like, what's quantized? What's quantized? Why isn't this, this, that, and the other? And I'm like, I didn't have the answer to any of these questions, because at that point, everybody was just telling me oh, this is really good for a 14-year-old. This is really good for a 16-year-old. And it was always subjective. So then did that thing that got me into college, because Lord knows my grades didn't. And I ended up going to Chapman University for music composition and film production on a scholarship. And in December of my freshman year, first semester, I met Bill and Robin Brawley from the Young Americans at the time, and I showed them my musical that I wrote. I gave them a copy of the soundtrack, and I was like, hey, if you guys need anything, this is what I do. And 18 years old, they hired me to do orchestrations and the backing track for one of their annual Christmas productions and holiday shows that they do. And so got to work with them, and then that led to me joining the group and doing more production for tours and everything. I had a VS 1824, which right here in the back of the studio, that I would be tracking all this stuff through, and we'd, doing dinner theaters and tours and custom arrangements of, everything from pop to rock to Broadway to classical, and having to use the Triton Pro X to dial in the sounds and figure out how to get things, tightened up as much as possible. And then GarageBand came out and got into the, all of the jam packs, they used to call them, the expansion stuff that now comes free with Logic. And then that got me into, opened up a whole new world of producing and, creating instrumental backing tracks and working with artists and people in the group had songs that they've written. We ended up turning that into this singer-songwriter program as part of the outreach tour, where we'd actually write songs with the kids in each town that we were in. And then I got back from doing that, went to the LA recording school to further it, started up my own recording studio to work with first-time artists and kind of build my portfolio. And, got into Pro Tools, and, they were like, hey, like, I want to go for this vibe. And I'm like, cool, let me research, everything that this band's done, and make notes and, generalizations and stuff and little tropes of how they like to write and what they like to, what makes up their signature sound so that you can recreate it non-plagiaristically, if that's a word, and then that led me to working with other people, working with Robert John, producing for that band alongside other band members and stuff. And then really focusing on like honing it and getting it better and playing live. Started working with Warren Hewart in 2013. Warren started up Produce Like a Pro. I'm, watching all that stuff. And then he's also calling me to do keyboard stuff for, him and I did over 200, 300 records together within the first like 5-6 years.
Wow.
Between different artists, and got me in the room as a session player, playing with, Daniel Powder in the room and like working through arrangements with Callum Scott. And, being the guy on the piano to help set arrangements and come up with parts. And then, every idea that I could think of in 3 hours, put that towards a track for then Warren to kind of take and be like, cool, I can use this, I can't use that. And here's all the elements for this tune. And then from working with Warren, it ended up going to work with other people and, ending up doing my own productions and working with Trev and working with, in the comedy scene with my buddy Brett Moline, doing music for his musical comedy material. And then Brett and I wrote a musical together, and that led me to interact with some other people. And, then I got the Toto call, and
I mean, I'm surprised. I'm surprised Toto let you in, Steve. Don't they hate session players? And that's obviously a joke, because they're some of the greatest session players of the last 50 years. I think that's an amazing, like your description there of those teenage years into your early adulthood. I can't think of a more diverse and impressive hands-on apprenticeship. So a lot of people will go and do film and TV composition or related, musical courses at university, college, so on, but may not have that hands-on.
Yeah.
But essentially from the end of your first year, you were doing hands-on orchestration, production, and so on, which is just amazing.
Yeah. And it wasn't through the university. I had a really great composition professor that helped me out with a lot of stuff, and for years after I left. But I completed my only 3 semesters of college, and then I dropped out of Chapman, went on indefinite leave, is the the better word for it. But it was working with the Young Americans and like the quick turnaround times. Like they had 3 tours going out in the same, in a period of a month, at the start of the year. And I would have to put together all of that music, whether, and for each tour, it was between like 20 to 70 minutes worth of new arrangements and things that were going out. And then I did 5 summer dinner theaters in Northern Michigan with them, which everything was created on the cast and had to be created within 2 weeks. So you're talking like a 2-hour show, an hour of which is playback, and it largely medleys and stuff like that. But it's like, hey, here's 11 musicals in 7 minutes. So you have to figure out a way to not only like pick apart these Broadway orchestrations so that it sounds like the Broadway track, but you have to figure out how they relate to each other and where your ins and outs are, and what your through lines are, and both in melody and counter melody and instrumentation. And I think that that's really what prepared me so well for the Toto gig, is being able to identify like, oh, this is that, but it could also be all these things. Like, I don't have an ARP. I don't have modular synths. I don't have, these old keyboards. Like, I'm working with what I got and what I've bought for myself. And, and it's cool to just be able to be like, cool, I've got 16 layers here that I can work with on this FA06. Like, how do I get it in there and then fuck it up enough to sound cool and have it be what's, closest to what this genius did, for the record, whenever the record came out, that I wasn't a part of. And I don't have the stems. I don't have, multi-tracks to reference. Like, I'm taking the MP3, like, I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but like ripping it from YouTube, sending it to my phone using the Moises app and separating it out, into, guitar, vocals, bass, drums, and other, and then working through that other file and figuring out what is there enough to be able to come into the rehearsal and then work with David, and Jordan, and just be like, hey, this is what I heard. Let's make it what it needs to be. And if it's totally wrong, let's throw it out and let's start it from scratch. Like, I have zero ego about any of that stuff. It has to be right.
And that all that learning has obviously translated into your own solo work. So I know you've released some songs recently, and I've listened to your most recent release single, Keep On Trucking, probably about 10 or 12 times. Just love it. Tell us a bit about what the momentum was for you doing that recently.
Most recently, after stepping away from Robert John and the Wreck last summer, I had a lot more time on my hands that I, had devoted to that project for a long time. And I had a bunch of tunes that, I've been doing the Patreon thing for since 2018, and during the pandemic, I made the decision to go to a bi-weekly release schedule. So I was releasing new music every Tuesday and Thursday. And then as we were coming out of the pandemic, I backed it off to once a week. And so I had all of these, I'm constantly writing, and I was constantly coming up with ideas for that project, and our kind of my job writing for Robert John and the Wreck was like, if I wrote a country song, then we could, take it to the band and apply, the tropes of what we have in that band instrumentally and what we've done in the past, and we can turn it into Southern rock, and we'll adjust the melodies and adjust the arrangement. And sometimes, like, it's not about writing the entire piece. It's like, just give me the idea so that we can put it together as a band and everybody has input and stuff. And that was always really a nice thing. Writing with those guys was that I could come in with just a verse and a chorus, or just a groove and a hook, And so I had all of these things that, I had pitched over the years and may or may not have been, even worked on by the band, like they used to say like, oh, this is a little too, a little too Steve, not as Robert John and the Wreck as we need it to be. So I had a bunch of and like, I don't sit down to write. I try to focus on my writing sometimes if I'm writing for a project, but when you sit down and you're doing it, like, you're just kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you second guess yourself, or if you, don't follow a creative, thread. So I'll sit down to write something, and I've got, a couple prompts or little notes that I write to myself of like, cool little catchphrases or whatever to work into something, or like a little melody line that I'm singing into my phone as I'm driving down the freeway. And had a bunch of these that, either we worked on and didn't come to, like, the other guys couldn't vibe with it, or, some stuff that just never would have worked for the band anyway. Keep Truckin' was one that I did pitch to the guys, and we just couldn't figure out how to do it as a band. So I was like, cool, I'll do something with it myself. And it's been really fun just going through and finishing up some of these ideas, as I'm building out this new space and everything. It's 2020 and 2021. I did like over 100 co-writes with friends and different people that I respect and admire. And now it's just a matter of like, cool, like I put that out on Patreon, like this writing demo. With Produce Like a Pro, I was doing the Sessions with Steve thing program, which was every other Monday I was uploading a full set of multi-tracks for one of my own productions. So wow. That kicked my butt into being like, you got to finish these tunes up, because there is an outlet for it, whether you're going to put it on Spotify or not. You've got to meet this deadline of doing this and doing mix breakdown videos and stuff. And for that, but it's been really nice just to like go through and finish things up. And I'm working remotely with a lot of people. Jake Hayden on drums, he's running the Hayden studio in Van Nuys, California, and he's got his input list is just ridiculous with the gear that he's got at his place. It's like going to Sunset but remote, and way better than what they've got at Sunset. And then also just his feel and his intuition and everything. And I've got my kind of pockets of guys around for different stuff. 504 Horns out in Louisiana. That, I just send them a track. I'm like, I need horns on this. Get creative. And, here's the little demo of, what I was thinking, but feel free to do your own thing. Shuffle Brothers, Gabe and Gideon Klein out in Gallatin, Tennessee. Like anything string related, full chamber orchestra or stand-up bass or fiddle or guitars, lap steels, pedal steel, all that stuff, like drums. They do really well too. And just putting these together like from the road was really neat. And then I'm like, yeah, fuck it. Like, why not put it out? Why not, give myself a little bit of creative outlet beyond the Patreon stuff, and hopefully it'll all point back to all of the things, and and everybody will be happy and everybody wins.
That's right. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And yeah, look, we'll definitely be linking to your new work. It is well and truly worth a listen. It's great stuff. And before we move on to some of our last set questions, Steve, I do, across your massive production career, just as an Australian, I have to ask you one specific question. That's about Natalie Imbruglia. What was your involvement with her?
My involvement with her was coming up with ideas for a demo recording that she had done with Warren. Warren contracted me out to just come up with some keys ideas for the song that they were working on. I still to this day don't know if the song even came out or what it was called. But it was really fun just being like, who's this artist for? And it's like, oh, Natalie Imbruglia. I'm like, no way. Like, awesome. Cool. And, unfortunately I never got to meet her or anything, or work with her in person, but, it was really, really cool just getting to throw my ideas down and be a part of that production. I feel like that's a common thing. I do very few sessions where everybody's in the room together. Like at most it'll be like me and Sean Hurley and Blair Center or something at Sunset cutting, rhythm tracks for somebody's record, but that's, it's been about a year since I've done anything like that. And it's just, it's a little fewer and further between these days, at least for me, but also I'm gone so much, I don't know when I'd be able to
That's right.
fly back in, but
Yeah.
It is
No
really
more than-
special when you can capture that moment, all together in the same room, and especially with the artist, and especially if you're able to cut everything live, like Robert John and the Wreck, that was one of my favorite things to do with them, was to go into the studio. We did a thing with Produce Like a Pro and Daryl Thorpe, producing and engineering, where we went in and cut, I think, 4 songs or 5 songs in over the course of 2 days, just live off the floor. Vocals are live, everything else is live, and just, maybe do a B3 overdub, because I was doing piano and B3 on that stuff. But I wish we could do that more, but
yeah, it is. It's a real loss. There's so many advantages to working virtually, but you're right, you do lose something with that as well. And so, Steve, just some of our standard questions. I'd love you. I feel like we've covered your rig to some extent. So unless you had any really strong views on preferred keyboards, I'm happy to sort of move past the whole technology side of things. And
that's fine.
To ask you to tag a keyboard player. So is there someone else you admire? It can be living or dead. Obviously, we can't interview someone that's passed away, but is there someone that you go, gee, I'd like to find out more about their career, whether it's only just emerging as a career or someone that's got some real history as a player?
I mean, my favorite person to watch on socials currently is Lachy Doley.
Yes.
And I know that you've interviewed him on this podcast before, right?
Yeah, I have. And sadly, he's playing in my hometown here in tomorrow night. And sadly, I have a family commitment and have to avoid him. So, yes, but he's an amazing artist. Yeah. He's just insane, man. I've got to meet him once briefly over, it wasn't even FaceTime. I think it was like, I was just sending videos back and forth. Because we were working with Juanita Tippins and Prinny Stevens and Mahalia Barnes and Jade McRae for the Robert John and the Wreck album Shine a Light on Me Brother, and I was sending stuff back and forth, and Locky's there doing a gig with Juanita and was like, hey, like, we got to meet up sometime, we got to collab. And I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. And he's generally just a lovely, pleasant guy to talk to. Yeah. I think you'd get on great. Consider him tagged though, Steve, because Lockie and I have been in discussions about doing a follow-up, but feel free to suggest anyone else.
Bob Fridzema, incredible dude.
Great
worked
pick.
with Joanne Shaw Taylor, and now he's doing some stuff with Glenn Hughes this summer and everything. He's just one of the nicest guys and one of the most talented Hammond players that I've ever met. And we've done a lot of work together. We've co-written a few tunes that are going to be on my next solo record coming out in February. Hopefully, fingers crossed, if I get it done. And just a beautiful, beautiful man, and really great friend and great guy, and monster player, man. Just tasteful.
Yeah. No, very, very well and truly noted. Thanks. Thanks, Steve. That's brilliant. And then the dreaded Desert Island Discs question, Steve. Five albums. If you had to pick 5 and had to stick with them for the rest of your life, what would they be?
Number 1 would be Artist in the Ambulance by Thrice. To me, it's just kind of a perfect record. I love it. Beatles, Sgt. Pepper. It was the Norah Jones record, like the first big one with like Don't Know Why.
Oh, okay. I'll work it out and list it. Yep. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's 3. Probably Toto 4.
Yeah.
Just, it's so good, man.
It is. It's a classic. Yeah, absolutely.
And number 5, weirdly enough, the soundtrack to Jurassic Park.
Oh, wow. Cool. So 2 of those 5 have never been picked before. That's great. Yeah.
I loved film scores, and that's what I initially went to college to do was to compose for film, and realized I didn't like working with directors my first semester in college. I don't like having to do things twice. It's just not, It's not in my nature. You know, I like to get it right, but I don't like having to redo things. And film directors sometimes, you know, are very esoteric in their descriptions of what they want, and you know, will make you do things over and over and over and over again until it's right. And I just like, you know, can we get it right the first time?
That's right.
So,
Yeah. No, that's a great call. And so we're on to our quick fire 10, Steve, just 10 short, sharp answers to some basic questions. So
all right.
I think you've already answered this. The first keyboard you ever owned, I assumed it was the Casio?
Yeah. I can't
Yep.
even tell you the model number, but it was the one with the, you know, the piano button on it.
Yeah. I mean, I love Casio for how many people they've introduced to keyboards, but I hate their model numbers. They're impossible to remember.
Yeah.
Your most important pre-gig ritual?
Currently, it's like 600 milligrams of ibuprofen.
Yeah, that's a sign of age. Love it.
It's-
Yeah, great point.
But to be honest, for vocally, it helps loosen things up, and you know, chug some water, go to the restroom, have some ibuprofen, hit the stage.
That's great. Keytars, Steve, are they sexy or an abomination?
Much like lingerie, I think they should be kept in the bedroom. But maybe
That's one of the best answers.
I don't know. Maybe someday if they can figure out how to make it not look like you just want to be a guitar player, you know.
Yes. So a recent guest, and I don't think that episode's gone live yet. Apparently, some people call them shoulder synths now. So there you go.
Is that like satchel instead of man purse?
Yeah, that's right. Steve, I think I know the answer to this one too, knowing your skill set. Transpose button or adjust on the fly?
Transpose button.
Oh, there you go. You surprised me. Okay,
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
It depends on what it is, you know. If I learn something in one key, because I mean, for piano players, you know, like the shapes are totally different if you take it down a half step. So I'd rather just keep the shapes the same so that I know I can knock it out and just have that, you know, really quick and easy. But you can't do that with 4 keyboards and programming. So if I have to do it on the fly, I could. But the transpose button is a lot less mental work.
Agreed. If it's possible to list one, Steve, the favorite gig you've ever done?
Ziggo Dome in Amsterdam was really cool.
That was with Toto?
Yeah, that was nuts. And it was, I think it was the first time I had sang the verses on Waiting for Your Love, too. Which was funny because Joe Williams asked me, you know, if I'd be cool with, you know, singing that. I'm like, yeah, man, like whatever you need. Like, when do you want to start doing that? Like next week? He's like, no, can you do it tomorrow night? I'm like, yeah.
Of course.
Listening to it on repeat, you know, just like, here we go. And just getting out. And I think we had, like we ran through it like twice at sound check and stuff. And that was it. And I couldn't do the keys and singing at the same time until sound check, obviously, because the gear was on the truck. So I was like, all right, like time to put on those big boy pants and step it up, you know?
Yeah, that's impressive.
It felt so good, man. I was so nervous. And that whole show was just electric. It was just absolutely insane. I loved it.
No, that's great. Great answer. And so, favorite city you've ever played?
I'm going to go with, I forget the city, but it was in Gran Canaria in the Canary Islands. It was with Robert John and the Wreck. And we flew in that day from Paris and went, and we had, like, I brought my keyboard and the guys brought some guitars, but everything else was rented backline. And we ended up playing in this little amphitheater It was us and this really dope reggae band, and I think one other artist, but we had no idea what to expect, and we went, and that whole island was just out to have a great time. The place was packed with probably 1,200, 1,300 people, and it was just so fun to be like, wow, like we're in a place that I've never been before, don't even know where we are really after, the little sleep, and we just got taken such good care of, and it was such a beautiful night and beautiful time and beautiful people, and everybody's dancing and stuff, and it was really cool just to be dropped in and holy shit, this is amazing.
That's a great answer, and I honestly never thought I'd be talking about the Canary Islands on this podcast, so that is brilliant. That's amazing. The best thing about playing live, Steve?
The fact that it happens and then it's done. There's such a beautiful and tragic thing about that is just, it's why I do it. You have to be in the moment with whoever's in the band and whoever's in the crowd. So it is just as beautiful if it's, you and 5 audience members or 7 people on stage with 18,000 in the crowd. It exists in that moment only, but is able to play on in our minds for the rest of our lives, if it's so impactful.
Beautiful.
To me, that is just, that is just why I do it. There's a magic in it that cannot be recreated,
No, beautifully put. The worst thing about playing live?
Butt sweat. It gets
best. I think that's one of the best answers ever too. That's great.
It gets really hot on stage, man, and it gets. I don't know. I've never been comfortable being hot and sweaty. I maybe it's because I've always been a little bit of a larger dude in my professional career, but I don't enjoy being sweaty and having clothes stick to me. It pulls me out of the experience. It's uncomfortable, and I just feel really gross and self-conscious,
Yeah. No, reasonably so. So that might be a nice segue to name one thing you'd like to see invented that would make your life as a keyboard player easier.
Keyboards with built-in fans. You know how headlights used to pop up?
Not just fans, but fans.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can always put a fan back there, but or water-cooled pants, air conditioning for pants.
That's gold.
I think it's just because in rock and roll, it just doesn't look good. Unless you're doing punk or, ska, it doesn't look good to be on stage with shorts on. And so you're the middle of the summer, nobody wants to see my pasty ass legs, and it looks weird under a keyboard too, because you're not used to seeing under the desk, and so I just, water cooled pants or some sort of air conditioner for the pant legs that, wouldn't be too cumbersome.
Absolute brilliance. Yeah. I love it. So I'm going to go and patent that tomorrow.
Just call them breathers.
That's right. And Steve, the last one in the Quickfire 10 is your favourite non-musical activity or hobby. What keeps you sane outside of music?
I really love to cook. I've been enjoying cooking. That's probably one of the things I miss most when I'm out on tour, is being able to just cook my own meal and go to the store and just get something for that night or that morning, and I'm not a fancy chef or anything, but I whip the shit out of some eggs. So it's, I love making omelets. I love, sauteing spinach and making air fryer steak, and just, there's something primal and just, human about a meal and preparing something instead of, having it already prepared for you, or having to go get fast food or something, or, gas station truck stop food, which is always very beige. So.
Yes. Look, and I think that's a perfect point at which to end, Steve, because I think not only do you bring great food to the table when you're home, but you bring a hell of a lot to the table as a player. And that's obvious with your career to date. And we're certainly very excited to see this, from strength to strength in coming years. You're only getting started, Steve. So in spite of needing to take ibuprofen and sweaty butts, you've got a long way to go. So can't thank you enough for taking the time, and hopefully, we'll see you down in Australia relatively soon.
Yeah, we're hoping next year, man. It's gonna be
brilliant.
Gonna be good. There'll be news about that on TotoOfficial.com as it comes up, and
we'll definitely link to that. No, great stuff. So there we have it. I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I obviously enjoyed doing it. As I mentioned in the introduction, Steve has a great sense of humour and is obviously passionate about what he does. And as I also mentioned in the introduction, just his apprenticeship through school, his teenage years, and then his first work in music. I can't think of a better framework to get into the wonderful projects he's involved with now. So huge thanks to Steve for taking part too. I'm very excited to see him when he comes down under. So thank you all again, as always, for listening. We do need to give a shout out to our gold and silver supporters. First shout out this episode is to the musicplayer.com forums. We mention it all the time. I've been there for close on 20 years, actually more than 20 years. Paul has been there for many years as well. It is a great area for keyboard players to hang out and discuss everything we're all passionate about. So highly recommend the musicplayer.com forums. A shout out to Elk Electronic, one of our sponsors as well. Elk Electronic, all with a K. elkelectronic.com.au, highly recommended, particularly if you're Australia-based for synth repair, but they offer some great videos. They've got a great YouTube channel and so on. Speaking of great YouTube channels, Radio Grande, another great supporter of ours. So Radio Grande do some great funk reimaginings of some classic songs. Do check them out on YouTube. They're easy to find. And then also Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew. We could not do it without you, Tammy. Thanks for your ongoing support. And then Brother Paul Brown from the Waterboys, who, again, continues to be a great supporter of the show, and we hugely appreciate it. Now, speaking of supporting the show, and I'll see if I can stretch up here, we have some new commissioned artwork. So if you like T-shirts, and don't we all like T-shirts? Apologies if it's showing backwards. We've commissioned a number of pieces of artwork that are now available on T-shirts and other merchandise. If you go to keyboardchronicles.com, you'll see a merchandise tab there. Click on that and all the options are there for you. It really does help us keep the boat afloat. It does cost a little bit to keep this show running, and it just helps us at least break even. We're not about to buy our own private jet, Paul and I. Thank you to all of our supporters. Thank you to you for your continuing support, whether you're a listener or a viewer. If you are a listener and are on YouTube, it also does help us if you are able to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do consider clicking the subscribe link. It does make a difference to us. So again, thank you all for listening. We'll be back again very soon. We've got a lot of interviews in the pipeline and we love bringing them to you. So until next time, keep well.